Did Taylor Swift have a spiritual awakening? I've actually had this theory for a couple of years now, but with the announcement of the release of her new album, Midnights, and the text that she shares, I'm convinced. Now, I'm not a hardcore Swiftie that knows all the times and timelines and exact things and all the fine details, so this is just going to be kind of a general description of the things that I've learned on my spiritual awakening journey that kind of made me go, Now, most people, when they start their spiritual awakening, they go through what is known as a tower moment. That's like when everything hits the fan and it makes you really step back and go, what the heck? I do not want to live this way anymore. And you can go through a series of tower moments, not just one, but there's usually one that kind of like really ignites the whole inward journey. I think the major first tower moment that Taylor had was with the whole Kim and Kanye thing, because that's when she went off of social media and kind of went quiet for a better part of a year. When you go into a major hermit mode, you really just remove yourself from everything because you really have to take a step back and analyze what is going on. So Taylor was always seen as this good girl next door, always does things nice and tries to make everybody happy. Now, when you do that and you step into that people pleaser mode and you don't speak your truth, or you feel you can't speak your truth, you really suppress a lot of your authenticity out of fear. And when you do that, you get a buildup a lot of times of resentment and anger. Cue Reputation. Now, when Taylor Swift came out with Reputation, her kind of tagline for that tour and era was, "There will be no explanation, just reputation." And I think she used this tagline because she realized that no matter how much she defended herself, it was never going to change the way people saw her. They were going to have their own opinion of her. So I don't think it was an effective use of her energy to try to explain herself or combat this narrative that had gone on with Kanye and Kim. This album screamed unapologetic to me, and when you have been a people pleaser your whole life and have just been a good girl and kind of sat back and not really been able to speak your truth, that's what happens when you break free from that. You enter what a lot of people call the villain era. You don't really care what people think about you anymore because you've held back too long and you're just ready to let it all out. And there was so much symbolism in this album and on this tour with the snakes. Now, at the basic level, the snakes represent when Kim called Taylor a snake. But there's even more to this on a spiritual level. In spirituality, snakes represent a shedding of the old self and a rebirth, which is a very scorpionic energy. It's death card energy, which represents the death and rebirth. It can also be associated with shadow work, which is why I also like that this album is a dark vibe, because it gives shadow and embracing of the shadow self. Now, snakes get a bad reputation. See what I did there? I really think this stems back to the story of Adam and Eve, where Eve took the apple and was tempted by the snake, but that apple was actually from the tree of knowledge. But that's a whole other thing. Now, in Hinduism, the snake symbolism comes with what is known as a kundalini awakening. Kundalini awakening is the awakening of your life force energy, often represented by the snake. It's traveling up the spine, they intertwine upwards. And Kundalini energy is also associated with spicy time, sensual energy, if you will. And to my knowledge, this is really the first time we see Taylor's spicy side come out as a theme in this album, most importantly when we hear the song Dress. So yeah, she's exploring that energy and that life force coming up. This is also our creative energy. As we know, Taylor is very creative. She is an artist. But there's also parts of that creativity energy that are suppressed, such as our emotions, such as pleasures in life, and spicy sensual energy. The other thing about Kundalini and Kundalini energy is that when you go through a Kundalini awakening, it burns away all the parts of you that do not align with your authentic self. It is a fire that burns within you. And Taylor has been giving us a lot of fire symbolism recently, including in her new Midnights album cover, where she's holding a lighter. And I saw a theory that someone said that she plans to burn the whole Lover House down now that it's complete. And I just think yes. I used to think Reputation was a Dark Night of the Soul kind of album, but I actually wonder if Midnight is really going to be deep into that Dark Night of the Soul energy. And if Reputation was just a time of self-exploration. Now, I was going to do Lover next, but I know I have not even heard this album yet, but I have a feeling that Midnight is actually a prequel to Lover, even though it's being released after Lover. And even though I think it was planned to be released in this order also. Now, in the 10-minute version of All Too Well, Taylor Swift references the twin flame bruise, and she has a lighter here with her. Twin flame has been kind of a buzzword the last couple of years, so I don't know if she would have originally written that in her lyrics for All Too Well or if it was added. But regardless, if you follow twin flame theory or rhetoric or you're familiar with it, a lot of times twin flames have abandonment wounds that need processing. And oftentimes when you meet your twin flame, you end up going into a separation period that triggers a dark night of the soul or a spiritual awakening. The twin flame journey is also all about taking your power back and coming home to yourself. And she says right here, we'll meet ourselves. The dark night of the soul is the time when you face the darkest parts of yourself that you have hidden away and rejected. You face all of your deepest fears and you learn to love yourself unconditionally. And what she describes in this text here is textbook Dark Night of the Soul to me. Lying awake in love and in fear, in turmoil and tears, twisting in self-made cages. The Dark Night of the Soul is also about deconditioning everything you've ever known in life and about yourself and learning that what you've been taught to be is false. The narratives that have been put upon you are false narratives. You realize that all the limitations that have been placed on you have been passed down, but you've allowed yourself to live in those self-made cages for so long because no one told you that you could change who you are at any moment and change your beliefs and change your life. It's giving Eight of Swords, which is all about self-imposed limitation. I think the stories of her 13 Sleepless Nights is her facing different scenarios that were unprocessed or maybe even a pattern. And oftentimes when you're going through a dark night of the soul, you do have disrupted sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night for what feels like no reason at all. And you get a lot of hits of creative inspiration. I also like the reference to the lanterns. She says, for all of us who have tossed and turned and decided to keep the lanterns lit and go searching, hoping that just maybe when the clock strikes 12, we'll meet ourselves. It's giving Hermit card in the tarot deck. This is usually what people refer to when they speak about going into hermit mode. And if you look on the traditional tarot card for the Hermit is holding a lantern. The Hermit goes into hermit mode to reflect inward on themselves and let the light shine from inside out. The Hermit goes to the top of a mountain by themselves and isolates themselves as they do this self-discovery. And the dark night of the soul is the time where we allow ourselves to meet our true selves. So I think this was a time when Taylor was deconstructing all the things she's ever known about herself and had been taught about herself and life, and really is having the opportunity to meet herself and really face the demons of her past and love herself through them so that her authenticity can shine. So sometime during the Reputation era, she may have had some sort of other major tower moment that really sent her into this deep, deep self-discovery and meeting of her shadow self and shedding of her old self so her authentic self can shine. So she can be the Taylor that she chooses to be. Now, this doesn't happen for everybody, but for a lot of people, when they embark on a spiritual awakening journey, they enter the realm of crystals and tarot and astrology and numerology, and can sometimes be a little witchy. And in the Willow music video, we saw Taylor get in touch with her witchy side with that witch scene. And this was my favorite scene in that music video. When I saw it, I just fell in love with it. And then Taylor dropped these limited edition vinyls for her new Midnights album, and they have names of crystals or kind of witchy things, like the blood moon, moonstone, jade green. I got the jade green one. I'm so excited. Again, she's kind of showing that witchy connection. So I think Midnights is really going to dive in deep into the darkest parts of herself that she faced throughout her life and during this time of processing and facing herself and meeting herself. And I think for the first time, we're going to get to meet the real Taylor as she has defined herself. And that this is actually the prequel to Lover. So if Reputation, Lover, and Midnights are a trilogy, I think that Lover would actually be the last in the order if it was told in succession. This album has always screamed spiritual awakening to me, mainly because of this track called Daylight, which was actually supposed to be the name of this album before it was changed to Lover. But the lyrics that really stood out to me are, I've been sleeping so long in a 20-year dark night, and now I see daylight. I mean, boom, right there. She's been asleep to her truth, like so many of us are before we go through a spiritual awakening. This album also has a lot of deep self-reflection in it, and it highlights the part of the journey where you reflect on the role you have played in the way things have gone in your own life, and that you have the power to change them. It's about owning up to your you-know-what. She says her love was as cruel as the city she's lived in, that there were so many lines she has crossed unforgiven, and that could be unforgiven by others. And it also could be talking about that things that she never forgave herself for, the way that she's behaved in the past in her relationships and her role in them. And then she says, I'll tell you the truth, but never goodbye. I don't want to look at anything else now that I saw you. I don't want to think of anything else now that I thought of you. This to me really speaks like she's talking to herself and her inner child. Part of this journey is inner child healing for some. So this really spoke to that for me. She's never going to abandon herself again. And those who have abandonment wounds usually are people who do abandon themselves in order to feel love from others. In the outro of Daylight, she talks about wanting to be defined by the things she loves and not the things she hates or the things she's afraid of. And this speaks to me about the notion of where attention goes, energy flows. So focusing on the things that you love instead of the things you don't like, because what you focus on grows in your life. Don't even get me started on The Archer. A lot of people did not like this song when it came out, but I resonated heavy with it and I loved it. I could probably do a whole video on the dissection of the lyrics of this song. But again, we see the processing of abandonment wounding here and the different roles played in different relationships. We see her question her beliefs about what it means to be different genders in society and how we're taught these belief systems. We see her tap into her manifestation power. She talks about being an architect, drawing up the plans. But ultimately, the Pink and Blue Skies talks about coming out of that dark night and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, letting your light shine and freeing yourself from the bondage of your past. So with the snakes and the kundalini fire, and that representing that spiritual awakening, that life force within, and the burning away of all the old parts of yourself, the death and the rebirth, then it would make sense to burn it all down because it was built from the old self. Burning down this old lover house is a true testament to saying goodbye to the old self and really stepping into that rebirth of the authentic self that Taylor has identified for herself. She's reclaimed all of her power from the past. She's got her re-records. I know they haven't all been released yet, but this is a true testament to tying up the loose ends of the old self and really stepping forward into the new chapter of her life and that new timeline. It takes a lot of courage to be your authentic self, especially when it goes against everything you've ever been taught and everything you've ever known. But it is so freeing, and I'm so excited for Taylor no matter what path she takes next. She's a legend.